Insist on giving more of our roads to cyclists.
Boris, have you got something against black cab drivers?
Live from the Indigo at the O2, this is the State of London debate, hosted by Nick Ferrari on LBC.
Welcome to the State of London debate, live from the Indigo at the O2 at Greenwich and live on LBC. You can watch it live at lbc.co.uk and join in on Twitter using the hashtag AskBoris. Over the next uninterrupted 90 minutes, you'll hear the London Mayor put on the spot in his final appearance on one of these tough question and answer sessions. Yes indeed, in less than 12 months, the role of Mayor will be up for grabs. But has the current incumbent lived up to his promises? And what might lie in store for a final flourish? Well, there is only one way to find out. To some, he's the Right Honourable Member for Uxbridge and South Ruislip. To others, he's the Mayor of London. To some taxi drivers, he's... Well, enough. Ladies and gentlemen, your appreciation for Boris Johnson.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nick. Well, folks, this is it. We're coming now to this is the climactic, tear-sodden State of London debate and we're coming out of the last lap of our mayoralty, and all my team are here tonight, and we are heading for the tape absolutely flat out. I'm very, very proud, obviously, of a lot of things that we've done over the last 7 years. I look back to that time when we came in, when London stood on the verge of a precipice. It seemed the worst economic disaster of the last 50, 100 years, a terrible recession, and look where we stand today, at the absolute pinnacle of the world. The number one tech capital in the whole of Europe, if not the world. 500,000 jobs now in tech. I claim credit for it, of course, myself. I had virtually nothing to do with it, but nonetheless, it's an astonishing testament to the resilience of the London economy. We are the world's #1 financial capital, the artistic capital, the cultural capital. It goes on and on. Last year and the year before, we knocked Paris, we knocked New York off the #1 spot for the first time in my lifetime, folks. We are the most visited international city in the world. We're the most popular city. Everybody wants to come. Everybody wants to come to London. Everybody wants to come to London. And we're forecast to have another 18.8 million people, another record this year. London now accounts for 25% of UK GDP for the first time since the Romans founded it, folks. It's an absolutely astonishing thing. And, of course, we're not only providing unparalleled opportunity for people to get jobs, and we're creating more jobs than ever before, but we are also seeing, and this is, I think, what is going to surprise you tonight, we're also seeing equality of outcome in ways that I don't think people expected. We are reducing some of the most fundamental inequalities in our lives. I mean, in ways that I don't think people expected. We are reducing some of the most fundamental inequalities in our lives. And I mean this quite literally. When I became mayor 7 years ago, it was a shameful fact that the gap in life expectancy between people in Kensington and Chelsea and those in Barking and Dagenham was about 5 years. Do you see what I mean? And what's happened since then is life expectancy overall has gone up by about 18 months for both men and women. You live longer under the Conservatives, my friends. You do. But it has gone up. It has gone up furthest and fastest for those in the lowest socio-economic groups and in the poorest neighbourhoods. So the gap that I talked of earlier is now down to 3 years. Now, why do you think that is, folks? Why is it that we're seeing a reduction in this gap in life? Why are poorer people in lower socio-economic groups actually living proportionally longer? Well, what are the big killers? What are some of the reasons you could have died on your way? Yeah, well, no, that's not true. We've got more people in London than ever before. We've got more people, and it's not true. Absolutely not true. We've got more people in London than ever before, and we've still got 4 of the 6 week. I'll give you some of the reasons. To save you the trouble of heckling me. I might mention murder, or fire, or poor air quality, or road traffic accidents. All of those hit the poor the hardest. And If you look at what happens with murder, crime disproportionately affects poorest neighbourhoods. Fire disproportionately affects people in lower socioeconomic groups. 82% of the primary schools that have bad air quality are in the poorest neighbourhoods in our city. And it is a tragic and a disgraceful fact that if you live in a poor neighbourhood, or if you come from a low socioeconomic group, your kids are 5 times more likely to be hurt in a road traffic, seriously injured in a road traffic accident, than if you come from an upper economic group. And that is why tackling those problems, tackling those killers, is not just common sense, it's social justice, folks. And I'm proud to say that in the last few years, the murder rate has come down 50%. We've cut deaths by fire in London in the last 5 years by 50%. They're cut in half. Air quality has been improved by about 20% for NOx, 15% for PM10s, the nasty dust stuff, and road traffic accidents, one of the biggest killers in our city. Road traffic accidents are down 40% since I've been mayor. We have last year, we had the lowest ever number of killed and seriously injured on London streets. And 2014, since I'm interrupted by a heckler, I will tell you that 2014 was actually the safest year ever for cyclists. Pedestrians alone saw a 7% reduction in KSIs last year alone, and this year last year. Now, what are the big killers? The big killers, apart from those, are, of course, cancer, obesity, heart disease. What causes those deaths, really? What's behind those phenomena? It's poverty. It's poverty. Someone says sugar, it's bad diet, it's poverty, it's bad education. And we're tackling something. In the last 7 years, we've seen there are now 400,000 fewer people living in poverty in London than there were when I began. We're tackling that poverty. We're tackling that poverty through education, and above all, through jobs and delivering growth for our city. And that is what is, in the end, causing that increase in life expectancy and that narrowing of the gap in our society. And that is absolutely vital for a one-nation approach to our country and our city. And we've got to keep it coming. I'll end up with this point. We've got to keep it coming. I know all of you who come along here tonight, you care passionately about this city. You think, like me, that it's the most fantastic city on earth. But we all know, it is, but we all know that we've got to keep our lead, we've got to keep our edge. We are at the top of the moment, but you can never be complacent. Baghdad was once the most populous, most prosperous, and most successful city on earth. Oh yes, it was, in 800 AD. London's got to keep its lead, and that means investing in the big stuff that we need for our city. Crossrail 2. Do we want Crossrail 2? Yes, we do. Do we want the new river crossings? Yes, we do. Do we want the tube extensions for South East London? Absolutely. Do we want the extension of the North? No, don't say no, you're completely wrong. We need them. Do we want the Northern Lights? We need all those things, and we need hundreds of thousands of new, low-cost homes on the brownfield sites that we can deliver across the city. We can do it, and we will do it over the next few years. We can take this city forward. It has been an absolute privilege for me, for my team, for everybody at City Hall for me to be allowed to be your mayor for the last few years. And I look forward in the final year to taking what we've done forward, as Nick says, to completing this year in what we are calling in City Hall Operation Juddering Climax. That is what we intend to do. But in the meantime, can I thank you very much for the confidence that you have shown us for so long. Thank you for listening. Thank you all for coming tonight. And I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Right, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Let's hear it for Boris Johnson. So let's get into the early stages of that juddering climax, and I'll tell you how you can get involved. You can watch on, of course, lbc.co.uk and follow on Twitter. The hashtag is Ask Boris. Now, we have a team of 5. If they could wave like crazy people and make themselves known to the audience, thank you very much indeed. Have a quick look around you, locate your nearest person, try and catch their eye. To get things started straight away, we're into the first question. So I happen to know it's Peter in Orpington. Peter in Orpington, you're going first. Peter, where are you? Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Johnson. My fiancée and I have just bought our first house. We own a 30% share in the property. Our mortgage is nearly £80,000. My question is, we're quite dependent on our parents dying and getting our inheritance to buy that house. How is that an affordable house?
Well, you're paying on a 30% share of your property. I hope very much that interest rates as you should be, and obviously that your circumstances will allow you eventually to staircase up and to have an even bigger share of the equity of the value of that property. And I think that the kind of mixed tenure that you've got, part by part rent approach, which is I assume what you've got, is a very valuable approach in our city. It does allow people to get a foot on the property ladder. And yes, you mentioned inheritance and the value of inheritance, and I might just point out one of the sensible things that I think that this government is going to be bringing in very shortly. It was certainly a prime part of the election manifesto, is to raise the threshold for the inheritance tax in this country, so that families living in London who are living in homes whose value has no fault of their own, of having to sell that home when their parents die, and that is something I think will make a big difference, and it will allow for the transfer of property down the generations and a cascade of wealth which I think otherwise would not have taken place.
How many affordable homes have you built in your time, Mr. Mayor?
Well, I can tell you the figure more or less exactly. The number is, I think, now standing at 94,000 since I was elected, and we will comfortably achieve the...
I have a figure of 53,000.
We will comfortably... Well, I can tell you the figure is 94,000. Where is Rick here?
You're determined it's 94,000?
I'm determined it's 94,000.
All right, well, I have 53. What was your original target in 2008? What did you say you would build?
The target is 100,000.
No, what did you originally say? You originally said 145,000, which was then downgraded to 100,000.
Well, Nick, you've got a memory of
I have.
Moses.
That's my job.
I don't remember.
That's my job, Mr. Mayor.
I don't remember saying anything. But I have said.
Yeah.
Hang on. In all fairness, I don't think anybody. I've never heard that figure of 145,000. I've said 100,000 for the last. And by the way, let me remind you. So the figure is 94,317.
Well,
and last year, that's the figure. And last year, actually, we saw the highest number of affordable homes delivered in London since 1991. And we are now building more affordable homes. We're now building more homes in our city than any year since 1981. And by the way, can I just complete the point? They are low-cost, affordable homes for Londoners.
And let me tell you, Lord Kerslake, who is chairing the new Commission on Affordable Housing in London, yes, has described the housing shortage in London as, quotes, one of the biggest public policy failures of the last 50 years. 7.5 have been on your watch.
Well, let me just remind you. Since you allow the goldmouth to yawn in that inviting way. Let me just remind you that I was under the Labour government, and indeed the Labour mayoralty of the 8 years that preceded me, that and even in the huge boom that we all remember, they built fewer homes.
We're talking about you, though, Mr.
They built
Mayor,
fewer homes in 8 years than we built in 7 years. Point one. And point two, the Labour government left a deficit in affordable housing.
About your term, of course, Mr. Mayor.
You've just talked about Bob Kerslake's criticism of the biggest public policy failure of the last 50 years, with which, by the way, I profoundly agree. And that public policy failure was caused by the chronic and historic failure of the Labour Party to build homes. Look at the numbers. The Conservatives, we built more council homes in 5 years than the Labour Party did in 13 years. Indeed, Margaret Thatcher, and let me tell you, she's not necessarily a figure that you can quote without some personal risk these days, but Margaret Thatcher built more council homes in 1 year than the Labour Party did in 13 years. So put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Well, let's go to another question while we smoke that. It's staying with housing. We're going to Danny in Barnet. Mr. Mayor, he's in that direction, if you follow my finger. There we are. Danny, go ahead, sir.
Hi,
Yes.
do you think it's fair that people in council homes get to live closer to the centre of the city than people who pay or rent for their own homes in other parts of the city?
That's a very, very important question. Did you hear the question? It is a fact. I mean, notwithstanding some of the slightly uninformed criticism that people make, it is a fact that it is in the centre of London, in the central activity zone, in those 11 central boroughs, 30% of the housing is still social housing. 30% of the housing is subsidised massively by the taxpayer. And that is housing that is not available to people who are on higher incomes, who don't qualify for that kind of support. And that's why it is so vital to build that kind of affordable homes, that low-cost housing everywhere in London. Not just in the centre, but throughout the city. And we are doing, and actually what you're seeing now is a change in the kind of balance and composition of London as we build more and more affordable homes across the city. But I want to get back to the first questioner who's done the right thing in my view and has taken out a mortgage and has a share in the value of his home. It is entirely right that we should be helping people to get a foot on the ladder, get a share in the value of their home.
You seem to have avoided Danny's question. How fair is it for people living in council houses to be in the centre of the city and others who can't afford it are outside?
I think I did answer the question quite, sincerely, which is that we must make sure that everybody has access to the great job creating.
Do you think people should have to move out of those council homes, that people who aren't on council homes should be able to live in those areas, as opposed to people who are getting subsidised or assisted by other people?
I'm sorry, but I don't think I quite get. If you're saying should we be clearing people out of those homes, no, I think that's not right. I think what you need to do... Look, the reason London has a genius and a magic is that so far we've been able to keep the socio-economic mix across the city. There's a great dispersion of skills and talents across London. And there are some cities in the world that aren't like that. There are some cities in the world where you have groups going out to the suburbs, you look at the banlieue of Paris, it's a very, very different configuration. I don't want to see that here in London. Right. And that's why I've said repeatedly that I want to see London mixed, and whatever happens as we go forward now, with new policies on housing, I don't want to see the de-jumblification of London, if I can put it like that. I want to keep our city mixed, balanced, because that gives it its drive and its economic energy. Because we need all our workforce to be able to get to that central economic activity zone.
We may well return to housing, so bearing that in mind, we'll come back for more questions. Let's move to another area now, and we go to Steve in Ruislip. Steve, please stand up and wave so the Mayor can see you. Your question, Steve.
God. Hi.
Yes.
Hi. How can a well-known private hire app with a TfL licence be able to continue to trade when it's been proven a driver can drive without insurance, without adequate DBS checks and other things? Why have TfL, who are under your guidance, not revoked the licence?
Thank you. I think the answer, I'm afraid I can't see the gentleman.
He's right in front, by the chap in the LBC shirt there. Right in the middle.
There.
Oh, he's over there. There,
sorry,
right to the right.
There you go, he's over
there. Right.
Sir,
sorry, he's there.
Sir, are you from South Ruislip by any chance?
I'm afraid I'm Mr. Seen but not heard, sir.
Oh, okay, got you. A great man there he is. Okay, listen. What we can't do, and much as I might want to, much as I might not like some of the brash attitudes of these gigantic American internet companies and the way they think they can come over and disrupt the market in this country, I personally don't like it. I disapprove of it. I think that they're setting out to do serious economic damage to the black taxi trade, but it is not possible for me simply to ban something and expect that ban to work. I'm told by our lawyers at TfL that if we, for instance, on the insurance issues that you have described, if we were to revoke the licence in the way that you're urging me to do, they would be able to go to a court and get it reinstated overnight. And that is the position. We have to do some more sensible things, in my view, to champion our black taxi trade. And it's, the Rolls-Royce service is the gold standard service of taxis around the world, and they need support and they need help. And one of the most important things to do is to make sure there's more of a level playing field. It is not fair that a black taxi driver has to spend 4 years getting the knowledge, and somebody else can just cruise in and take up the trade without really knowing how London works and how it all fits together. So we're going to have, so TfL are currently consulting on a proper geographical test, so you can't drive a minicab in London unless you know one end of the city from the other.
Well, so that would be like a knowledge for Uber drivers.
There will have to be basic geographical knowledge. Point two, there'd have to be basic English, basic command of the English language. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing, do you? I think that's perfectly reasonable. If you're going to offer, if you're going to apply for, if you're going to offer your services as a driver.
How are you going to test Uber drivers and others' knowledge of London?
Well, we'll do it in the same way that we do for black cabs.
It'll be the same level of knowledge required?
No, it won't be like the knowledge, because I think it is important that the black cabs should retain their distinctiveness.
Who's going to check these people?
Well, the public carriage office. We will make sure.
And what level of knowledge will they need to have?
It will have to be, more than rudimentary. It will have to be, able to carry out a conversation to understand more than the difference between left and right, for instance.
Right, but to get from
that
Paddington
kind of thing,
from City Hall or something like that.
So, Mr. Ferrari, no, Mr. Ferrari, you can't use your Diners Club card or whatever it is they want to say. That kind of thing. America, or whatever they want to say. But the third point I want to make is that the apps that the gentleman from Ruislip is describing have led to a big expansion in the number of minicabs. Now, we've got to be very straight about this and very, very clear. The people of London are using this service. Hands up. Are there people here who have used any of these minicab apps? Come on, be honest. Fess up.
I would say not even a quarter. About what would that be?
I don't know about that.
Well,
come on, stick them up, Nick. Stick them up again.
I can tell you it's not a quarter. Look, it's nothing like a quarter. I would say there's probably about 40, 50 hands. So your point.
Does anybody agree? Does anybody agree with Mr. Ferrari?
Never mind. What is the point?
I don't think they agree with you,
What
Nick.
is the point you're trying to make?
The point I'm trying to make, respectfully, is that what's also going on here is that Uber and other services have proved very popular with the market. Now, in fact, they've proved so popular that we've got a glut of minicabs. And the third point I want to make is that in addition to the language test and the geography test, I think it's time for us to seek a ceiling, a quantity license system for the number of minicabs. I mean, let me tell you, when I became mayor of London, there were about, I think, 8,500 buses, 26,000 black cabs, and about 56,000 minicabs, right? We've now got, I think, 25,000 black taxis, slightly more buses, but we've got 81,000 minicabs, and it is growing. It is growing at a rate of 1,200 a month. Now, that is adding to congestion on our streets in some crucial parts of the city. Right. I don't think that, we can be totally oblivious to that effect. I think TfL has got to take a view, and we've got to start looking at the numbers that are flooding onto our streets. So that's the third thing that we want.
Mr. Mayor, while we're on the subject of taxis and taxi drivers, this is the first time I've seen you since the incident last week. I remind you, of course, you are live on the radio and indeed on lbc.co.uk.
Yeah,
what exactly happened?
Well, I don't think it was even last week. Now you come to mention. I think for some reason the video was circulating for a long time, but was thought, frankly, to be too tedious to broadcast. And for
I'll be the judge of that. What happened?
Quite understandable reasons. I've looked at it. I can barely make out what's going on in it at all. So it's hard. It's hard for me to give a very accurate or detailed account. Suffice it to say that there was a free and frank exchange. I would point out that I was returning, so I was, trying to get the ball back over the net rather than, so I was not, as it were, the first mover in the thermonuclear exchange. And what's the second point? The second point. I think the second point would just be this: as if you listen very carefully to what I said, I was very I actually, I offered a choice. I said not necessarily in that order.
Yes.
So you know, there was no. You could not say that I was being dictatorial.
Let's move to another question. We're looking for Eleanor in Waltham Forest. Make yourself known to the people in the room, because I don't do that. Where's Eleanor in Waltham Forest? Can you wave at us? Eleanor, right over here, Mr. Mayor. Look, follow my finger there.
Yes.
There.
Yes.
Eleanor.
Yes.
Recently, you overturned City Airport's proposal for expansion, which had been approved by Newham. Firstly, on behalf of residents of Waltham Forest, thank you for this.
All right.
Then my question is...
I thought you were going to beat me up.
My question is, why does Newham get to make decisions about City Airport which affect residents in other parts of London? And how can we take part in the democratic process without having to resort to appeals all the time?
Well, it's a very, very interesting question, and obviously local authorities do have, naturally, they have a democratic right to decide some of these things. I mean, the London Borough of Hillingdon, where Heathrow is situated, obviously have a right there. Hounslow have a right to be consulted, and so local councils have standing in this matter, because it's such a big decision. It falls to the mayoralty, obviously, to be consulted. And I just, couldn't for the life of me see how we could say that the people of West London had to be protected from aircraft noise early in the morning and late at night and around the clock through the Cranford agreements and other agreements that protect those that live around Heathrow, and then say to the people of Waltham Forest and Romford and elsewhere, well, tough luck, folks. I mean, I think that was completely irrational, and that was why I took the decision that I did. But I hope very much that if you care about this issue, and I hope that you do, that you will get involved in what I think is going to be a very interesting passage of argument now about how to equip this country with the runway capacity we need, because it is perfectly obvious to me that there's going to be an unholy mess when Sir Howard reports, and there will be all sorts
the Davis
of...
Commission.
That Sir Howard Davis is going. Sir Howard Davis is going to report.
Is that going to happen this month?
Well, the best of my understanding on this, Nick, is it's going to happen fairly soon.
How much notice do you get?
Within the next few weeks. I won't be getting very much notice, I understand.
What does that mean?
I've been briefed to expect something pretty soon. But
you get 2 days' notice, 1 day notice. How much notice do you get?
I haven't been given notice of how much notice I'm
going to
give.
When it comes around.
I don't know.
How much notice do they give you? 24 hours of what's going to happen?
I expect will be... I think that the truth is that because it's market sensitive, in other words, these are private enterprises, and shares in the airports can go up and down. I don't think that we will really be given any notice at all. They'll plonk this great document on our desks. And
how will you react if it's in favour of Heathrow?
Well, I will study the document with great care, as you can imagine, and I will reflect for about 40 seconds on if it comes out very, very firmly in favour of Heathrow expansion. I think that will simply lead to paralysis. I don't think that will produce a result. And I think I share the views of many people, possibly in this chamber tonight. We want to see a result, but I don't think Heathrow is going to deliver. Really and truly, you should see the map of the extra noise over London that would be produced by a third runway at Heathrow. You should see the modelling that TfL have done of the traffic impacts, of the vehicular pollution, all the environmental damage that would be done.
Suppose Mr. Cameron's persuaded as to the benefit of Heathrow. What would you say to him?
I would counsel him very strongly against it, and I don't think that I mean, it is my view, which I've stuck to now for many years, that David Cameron, George Osborne and everybody made the same commitment in 2010. We made a very clear manifesto commitment, no ifs, no buts. There wouldn't be a third runway at Heathrow,
so it's going to
or an expansion of Heathrow, and I think that the government will stick to that. Whether it goes to Gatwick, I can't say. What I do think, and this is, I really think that in the long run we are going to need a better solution and a bigger solution. And one of the things that interests me about Crossrail 2 is that it does open up the possibilities of Stansted. If you could do something extraordinary at Stansted, and I remain absolutely convinced that if you got going on a site far away from human habitation at the estuary, in the Thames estuary, you would deliver fantastic growth, fantastic opportunities for this country.
We shall wait and see. Let's go to another question. Applause indeed. Please do give applause if you agree with the Mayor, and let him know if you don't agree. That's the whole idea. Where's microphone 2? I'm looking for Adele. Adele on microphone 2. There. That way there, Mr. Mayor. Adele, go ahead.
Hello, thank you. Well, actually, I lived in southwest London and moved out 16 years ago because of the concern I had for Heathrow. And so I tend to buy into your view about Stansted or the estuary, because I think southwest London is chock-a-block for its infrastructure. But as a Londoner who had to move out for family reasons and education and better quality air, because I lived under the flight path, I visit London regularly and I'm passionate about it. And one of the things I notice every time I come back is the extent of construction and the impact that has on the roads and the system. And I wonder if you've really looked at the feasibility of pretty much insisting that lorries come into London at night between something like midnight and 5. To give you an example, I was in Covent Garden the other day. It was my daughter's birthday. We were up there. We almost got run over by a Tesco's truck at 5 o'clock in the afternoon on a Thursday afternoon. And it's like, what is this lorry doing in London at this time of the day?
Adele, well, look, I mean, that is for many reasons, that is a brilliant point. And I mean, just first of all, on Pete, your general sensation, your general impression that London is now convulsed with construction, that is, I'm afraid, true. It's partly a function of the statistics I mentioned earlier about house building and the economic success that we're enjoying. I've got to put my hands up and say that it is proving tough to manage our road network. And Nick, as a veteran motorist, will know what I mean, and a user of the Blackwall Tunnel and everything else, you'll know what I'm talking about. TfL are absolutely working flat out to manage this very, very scarce road space and keep the city moving. But we have phenomenal.
If it's so scarce, why are you taking more and more away from
bicycles? Before you come to that, I knew.
Well, it's a yawning goal, and I had to blast the ball in the net.
Wait. Well, I'm just going to palm that one off and quickly go back to Adele, because she asked a really good question about trucks and can we get them? Yes. Can we get them coming through the night, through the small hours? And well, in principle, you could. It would be violently opposed by the boroughs and by residents, because they make terrible noises, particularly when they're reversing. Beep, beep. And there would be huge objections from homeowners and people living around the area. What we can do, and what we are doing, is trying to manage the freight traffic in the way that we did during the Olympics, so as to minimise the impact, to have more out of London depots, so that you reduce the size of these great big juggernauts. You don't have to have colossal things thundering through the centre of the city, but you split up the load and you have smaller vans. We're working on all that kind of thing, and to rationalise it, and to try to one of the reasons you may have seen a Tesco's van at an off-peak time is that we're trying to keep them off the roads in the peak hours, because because people think you're crazy. Why have we got huge juggernauts delivering goods in the peak hours when that's when commuters want to, when Adele wants to go back to, where did you leave London for?
For the third runway on Heathrow.
Yes, no, but come from where you come in from, anyway.
Guildford.
Guildford, you'll come back. You in Guildford.
Yeah.
Anyway, wonderful though Guildford is.
All right. Well, let's get a question from the upper. We'll come back to air. I'll make a point of you want to talk about air.
The air in London, as I never tire of telling you, by the way, we had a recent. The whole country had a recent bad air day, and let me tell you that the air in Norfolk was worse than it was in London.
Mr. Mayor,
absolutely
as you choose
true.
to
Matthew,
raise
is that true? If you contest that point, I've got Matthew Penchas, Deputy Mayor for Environment and Clean Air, who will provide the relevant statistics.
In April, the air in London, using the PM scale, which is particulate matter, hit a high of 57. That's 6 times the recommended limits. So where do you suppose they'd rather be, in Norfolk or in London, breathing that in?
Well, no, as I say...
Oxford Street has been dubbed the world's most polluted street.
Dubbed, but inaccurately, falsely...
The reality is you could walk along Oxford Street on the rims of the buses.
And erroneously so dubbed. It's not. It is not. Oxford Street, it's a complete lie. Oxford...
Well, could we have some facts to back up the complete lie?
Hang on a minute. Wait, Oxford Street...
Yes.
Oxford Street is
the world's most polluted shopping street.
No, that is. There are
that's what it says
there are plenty of streets in
well, thank God, we're slightly better than Baghdad.
Around. No.
Why don't we mark it on that?
I think Stuttgart, Milan, Paris. There are plenty of other cities around Europe that have
maybe
higher
we'll return to air quality while you look for your notes.
Let me tell you, by the way, that one of the reasons. I mean, we do take it incredibly seriously, air quality, and we really are. You know, we've got the cleanest new buses in the world, where one of the gripes, one of the things that really hacks off the taxi trade is that we're making all their vehicles much, much cleaner, and that really cheeses them off, but it's got to be done. We are putting in all sorts of measures, particularly the ultra-low emission zone, which is coming in a few years' time, which will mean that if you want to drive your car into the centre of town, you will have to have a very, very low emission vehicle. And so we are reducing those emission levels in a way, actually, that even the great Simon Burkitt, who is one of the biggest campaigners on this issue, I think even he had to admit when he saw the figures on the Marylebone Road, it wasn't exactly that we shot his fox, to use a politically incorrect metaphor, but that he had to admit that big progress was being made. That isn't to say that there isn't a long way to go. There is a long way to go.
All right, okay. Let's go upstairs to a question from the upper tier, and we're looking for microphone 5. Sue in Bow. Sue in Bow. Up there, Mr. Mayor, if you again follow my finger. Sue, go ahead, please, your question.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Do you think there's anything to be learnt from the recent history of Lutfer Rahman, the ex-mayor of Tower Hamlets, in terms of fair sharing of resources to community groups?
Right. I think I understand what you're driving at. I think the implication of what you're saying is that under the late mayor of Tower Hamlets, or the recent mayor, I should say,
he's not dead.
No, the recent.
I think you mean former.
He's departed this political stage for how long I do not know. But under the departed mayor of Tower Hamlets' policies, I think it was alleged certainly that money was shoveled to this or that group with more an eye to currying local favour, so to speak, and encouraging local support than strict fairness. And that isn't on. It wasn't right, and I think it was rumbled. And I think the people of Tower Hamlets have just had a chance to vote again. They've given a very clear and decisive mandate to a new mayor, someone actually I know very well, and in a grudging way get on quite well with. And I think we've got to wish him every good fortune in what he is doing. I think one lesson from Tower Hamlets is it is very important for the police to take electoral fraud seriously. Right. And it should not be up to individual electors to go to the police with their problems. Done, and I pay tribute to the work of Peter Gold and others in bringing these
round of applause. Do please applaud so the mayor knows when he hits the sweet spot, as it were. Thank you for your question. We go to Mohammed in Maida Vale now, who I think is going to be over here. Mohammed, yes, sir. Blue shirt. Thank you. Mohammed.
Good evening, Boris Johnson. I just came to ask, why is not enough done to prevent radicalisation within London? Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Well, look, did everybody hear the question? What are we doing why is not enough done to prevent radicalisation within London? And I have to say that I think this is a job for the entire city and the whole of society, but particularly for the families whose kids may be growing up exposed to this kind of absolute nonsense. And it's pernicious, disastrous nonsense. The schools also have a job to do to identify, if kids are going to go off to go to support Daesh or whatever in Syria and Iraq, then they need to be spotted. The police have a job to do, and we've got a massive engagement programme with Prevent. We're currently, I'm sure you know this, I've told you this many times before, we're currently monitoring already in London about 4,000 people who are potentially, 3,000 or 4,000 people who are potentially a threat to our communities.
How can you possibly monitor that many people?
And
you
that
haven't
is
got enough police officers.
And that is the question that people always ask me.
Well, that's why I've asked.
The answer is that you have
a monitor 3,000 to 4,000.
No,
you haven't got enough police officers.
I know. But you've asked it before, and I'll answer it in the same way. The answer is that
you can't monitor them.
You can, but what you have to do is have a pyramid or a hierarchy of risk. And so when you look at people like Adebolawe and Adebolajo, who were responsible for the appalling murder of Lee Rigby, they were on the radar. They were known, but they weren't escalated high up enough on the pyramid of risk. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes,
so they're all there. They're all being
watched
watched in one way or another. But there are some that obviously you have to pay a lot more attention to. I think that just going back to the question about
at the lower end,
radicalization.
What does the monitoring mean in the lower end?
Well, it will mean, just getting back to the question, it will mean engaging with those groups and those communities, picking up intelligence about
how
what
many
is
of those
going on.
4,000 are really monitored, Mr. Mayor? I mean, really monitored.
Well, you know, I'm not going to go into the details.
No, I don't want their names.
How
10%?
Of what surveillance is or whatever
I'm
is,
not expecting
is
that,
used.
but
one.
We
monitor the whole lot. One crucial point to make is that it's got to be done. Even if I did know, I certainly wouldn't tell you.
Well, tell me that then.
The crucial thing to do is to remember that this is done by the police, and it is a strong counter-terrorism operation in London that you support local and to get involved and they do actually. Let me tell you, I'm glad you raised that. Let me tell you that police numbers in London are now up at 31,944, I think, which is pretty good when you consider where every other police force in the country has been going. And we've seen massive reductions in crime, and indeed we are seeing, you know, we have seen considering the threat that we face, I think most reasonable people would say that the police and the security services do an outstanding job of monitoring these people and
lastly on this,
safe.
when the Prime Minister says that Muslims need to look to themselves a bit, as he did last week, how accurate is he?
Well, I get back to what I said earlier on. I think the primary responsibility has got to be with people who love these kids or who know them, who are bringing them up. Their immediate families have got to take ownership of the problem. Right. And you know, I absolutely the kind of kids who are drawn into this kind of nuttiness are the same sort of people who can be drawn into any kind of gang crime or knife crime or whatever it happens to be.
All right.
And the people who if reported, they must be listening to this, who knows somebody who you think is staring at a computer screen and picking up all sorts of rubbish on the internet. Then for goodness sake, don't hang around. Tell somebody about it. Do something. Because apart from anything else, you'll be saving that person. You'll be saving that person from making an appalling mistake with their own lives.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We pause for the questions just for a moment to pick up on some Twitter traffic. Remember the hashtag #AskBoris. People are saying, with what you said about airport provision, if you shelve Boris Island, are you happy with a second runway at Stansted, as you seem to have indicated?
I think the Airports Commission under Howard Davies was very precipitate in ruling out expansion at Stansted, and I certainly think they were wrong not to go for the estuary. So I think, look, my view is other options will have to come back into play at some stage.
So you are happy with Stansted?
You know, I think it's a better option than Heathrow, put it that way.
All right. And here's an interesting one. Why are you combing your hair more since you became an MP?
That's outrageous. That's outrageous.
Sort?
But that implies for the last 7 years I've had insufficient respect for the people of London to comb my hair. It's complete nonsense.
So you're not combing your hair more?
No, I'm not. Whatever.
Okay.
Complete nonsense.
I didn't actually catch that. What did you say? You didn't tell me to something and die, did you? No. We move on. Lizzie in Tower Hamlets. Microphone 2. Lizzie in Tower Hamlets. That way, Mr. Mayor, if you would. Lizzie, shout out your question.
Thank you. Good evening. A resident of Tower Hamlets, we're plagued, like a lot of London boroughs, by antisocial behaviour. We've got quite a good neighbourhood watch, but they seem limited in what they can do. What suggestions and also what other measures are you going to put into place?
Lizzie, is that you over there? I can't see you, but thank you. I can't see you in the gloaming over there. But look, I'll talk to the borough commander, or we'll get on to the borough commander in Tower Hamlets about what's going on with anti-social behaviour. And if you can give more details afterwards to my team here, I'll be able to Roger Evans, deputy mayor here. I'll be very happy to look at the specific issue. I mean, on the whole, we are seeing falls in that type of crime. Overall, as people may have picked up particularly actually in Tower Hamlets, there has been substantial falls in crime, but clearly antisocial behaviour in your neighbourhood is something that we're not on top of by your account.
It has to be said, Mr. Mayor, in the area of crime, your mayoralty has been almost a complete success story until, sadly, the recent problems we have with stabbings and knife crime. And as a result, Commissioner Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe seems to be indicating support to bring back targeted stop and search. Do you agree with him?
Well, I think, look, I think the headline got a bit flammed up. I think most people in this audience would agree that there is a role for stop and search if it's done sensitively, if it's done politely, on over and over again in a kind of oppressive way, and if it is done on the basis of intelligence. You've got to know what you're doing before you stop someone and search them, and you've got to think about it and be courteous. And I think that's what both Theresa May and Bernard Hogan-Howe and I want to see. I want to see, but there are plenty of other ways of fighting knife crime. It has come down a lot since really grim times that I'm sure we can all remember, when we had about 30 kids a year losing their lives. We're still seeing too many kids dying. It's not as bad as it was. But one thing I think would help would be if Parliament got its act together and pulled its finger out, and now there I am to try and do something about it now, I suppose, and enacted what is called Enfield's Law, which is that if you're caught twice carrying a knife, then you have to have a custodial sentence. Right. I think that's entirely fair. If you're going out with a bladed weapon... Thank you. I like the way my team is applauding in the front row, rather sporadically, I think.
I think they woke up.
I think they did wake up. I think they're all looking at their BlackBerries and
yes,
rather
they
sort
are.
of... Come on!
Trying to tweet support.
They're tweeting. Sorry, that's okay.
Talking about policing,
sorry.
where are...
Gun crime. I can tell you...
You've got to say it louder. What was it? Gun crime? Gun crime.
Gun crime is, I think,
down.
it's massively down.
Yes, it's down
overall.
the long way. Yeah.
Okay. I can tell you the. Let me.
Well, don't worry about it. I want to ask you one other aspect.
Homicide is down, as I say, by about 50%.
Mr. Mayor.
Gun crime, I cannot disaggregate that figure, but I know it's massively down. I'll be happy to.
One final policing matter. Where are the water cannon?
Aha. They are, as everybody may remember from our frequent conversations about this matter, Nick, on LBC Radio, to which I hope people are still listening. The water cannon did come over from Germany, where they were procured at very little expense to the taxpayer, relatively speaking. They kept very, very cheap deal that we got. I don't know quite how they managed to make it over the channel incognito. I think they might have been disguised as ice cream vans or something like that. Anyway, they're here. They are in this country.
Are they in this
city? They are at a location. They are handily disposed for this city. And look, I mean, the reality is that nobody wants to see these things on the streets of London, least of all me.
Well, why did you buy them?
Because you've got to be...
How the hell does that work? You don't want to see something, so you buy it.
I don't want to see nuclear weapons used, do you?
No, but I didn't buy them.
Would you get rid of them?
I'm not the mayor and I'm not the Prime Minister. Right, we move to other questions.
Okay.
Nicholas in Docklands, where are you, sir? Can you wave at me? Nicholas at Docklands, we're over there, Mr. Mayor. I'm pointing to where Nicholas. Go ahead, Nicholas, if you would,
yes.
sir.
Why aren't you even standing there? That's the question we all want.
Never you mind. Nicholas.
Boris, I'm in a wheelchair.
Sorry.
That way, sir.
No, you don't have to be sad.
Where are you, Nicholas? I can't see you. Where are you?
Over here, Boris. Boris, 3 years ago, at this very event, I highlighted examples of misleading travel advice TfL was giving wheelchair users. You said you'd deal with this. Sadly, TfL is still giving misleading advice. The tube map, for example, says that wheelchair users cannot travel from Paddington to King's Cross. But they
cannot travel?
Cannot.
Right.
But they can.
Mm-hmm.
Why haven't you done what you said you would? And are you going to say sorry?
Okay, well, I'm certainly going to apologise if we've got something wrong, of course. I will. Look, the best I think I can do is get on top of the discrepancy between the tube map and what is the reality for wheelchair access. As everybody knows, we spend hundreds of millions of pounds trying to make our tube stations more accessible. We are I won't claim it is perfect. We have a Victorian system, but we're putting in new lifts, new disabled access the whole time. Isabel, we're going to talk to you straight afterwards, and I apologise for the glitch with the map.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to other questions. Now, microphone 4 is either Amy or Ralph. I'm sorry, I've got 2 notes here. Where is microphone 4? And you're going to have to... Is it Amy or is it Ralph? Hello, it looks like Amy to me.
Hello,
I've got real problems. Go ahead, Amy.
Yes.
Up there, sir.
Just over a year ago, I managed to scrape together a deposit to buy a property, luckily without either of my parents having to die, as you referenced earlier. In doing so, that move took me from a shared ex-council flat in Battersea to a one-bedroom flat in Thornton Heath. The difference in moving between an affluent borough and a poorer borough in North Croydon and the transport provision that came with is massive. I just want to know what you're doing to ensure the provision of services across poor and rich boroughs is more equal.
Yeah, well, thank you, Amy. I mean, I think I think you're putting your finger on the most important challenge. When I talked I don't know if you remember what I said at the end of my opening remarks about the need for London to keep ahead of the game and to keep investing. I reeled off a whole list of tube extensions and rail improvements that we need to do. It is my view that the whole of South London is badly served at the moment by the overground rail, and we need to see a serious integration between the services we offer, TfL, and the services that the TOCs offer, that the railways companies offer. It's absolutely crazy at the moment, and we could do so much better. If you look at what we did with the orange system, the overground. Does anybody know what I mean by the overground lines? They are massively popular. We put new trains on, air-conditioned trains. We staffed up the stations. We painted them. We made them safer. We put new lighting in. We deep-cleaned them. We did all that stuff. And that's what we're going to do, by the way, with the West Anglia line that we've just taken over in the northeast. But we definitely need to be doing that in the southeast and the south of the city. And the next one to come on stream, I don't think it may not be any good for you in Thornton Heath, but the next one to come on stream is the southeastern franchise, where we could do fantastic stuff, absolutely fantastic stuff, with no penalty whatever for the people living outside the London area.
The problem here, Mr. Mayor, is much of this is very exciting. It's actually not going to be on your watch. In hindsight, should you have done more in your first term, have been more ambitious?
I don't really see how we could have done more, Nick. I really, really don't. We don't forget, when I came in, they said to me, you've got to kill... First of all, you've got to deliver the best Olympics that's ever happened. Secondly, you've got to get rid of either Crossrail or the tube upgrades. You take your pick. That's what the Treasury said. They said, what's your priority for London? You can't have both. And there was lots of very influential voices saying the same thing. So, I remember people said, why are you, they said of Crossrail, why are you buying a new, flash new Maserati or whatever,
when the house is falling down. You know, you should be patching up the tube. And I said, no.
Yeah.
I said, absolutely not, we are doing both.
Yeah.
And we've
But
gone
we're
ahead, we went ahead with the biggest upgrade of the tube ever seen and the biggest engineering project in Europe. And since I've been mayor, in the first term, I think tube delays came down 40%. They've come down again by another 30%. I think most fair people using the Jubilee line, as I'm sure you do, I think most people would agree that it has got better, hasn't it? Yes.
There we are. I'd
Okay.
say applause on that. You're
That was
right.
a risk.
Back
But
to,
it has. It has. It's actually running about 3.5 miles faster. Miles
well,
an hour
we
faster.
make up for that on the roads, don't we? Which are running about 30 miles slower.
No, they're not. Average traffic speeds have increased from
What?
9.3 to a truly supersonic 9.4 miles an hour. So
there you have it. All right.
can't-
Twitter time. Twitter time. How do you think history will judge you as mayor?
Well, look. I mean, that's for history. But I think I hope that what people, when we came in, we faced a massive challenge. Everybody said London was, going south. They said it was going. They said the big winners of the great global crunch were going to be Shanghai, Mumbai, Dubai, bye-bye London. That's what they all said. And look at what's happened instead. It's been, we're riding very, very hard at the moment. And I think what I hope people will say is we got through a pretty savage recession, which had some pretty bad effects on loads of London families, and actually we created hundreds of thousands more jobs and helped people. And I get back to the opening point I make. I hope people will look at it back at it as an epoch which, surprisingly, inequality, by many key measurements, not least longevity, inequality actually diminished. And that was unexpected.
Applause there. One more Twitter before we go back to question of the audience here. How do you feel now you've been overtaken by George Osborne and Theresa May to take over the Conservative Party?
Well, as I never tire of saying, my job is Mayor of London. And I'm a humble backbencher and very proud to be so. And
that's not quite answering the question, is it? How do you feel now that you've been overtaken by both George Osborne and Theresa May to be leader of the Conservative Party?
Well, I think the most important point here, as I'm sure both George Osborne and Theresa May and everybody else would agree, is that we have a fantastic Prime Minister. Very good. And he's got a long time to go. And I think actually, he should go on and on. That's my view.
He should go on and on. He says he doesn't want to. Have you not been listening?
Anyway.
We move to other questions. John in Barnes. John in Barnes, we need to go to, where are you? Yes, almost in front of you, Mr. Mayor, right there in a white T-shirt.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to know what can be done to make it more safe for cyclists. Hardly a week goes by without some terrible tragedy, but as a pedestrian, I get sick to death of them on the pavement.
Right. And it's a very serious question. We have look. I know you speak for millions of people there, and lots of people share your frustration and your outrage at the behaviour of cyclists. Indeed, I do too now, because I watch cyclists jump the lights, mount the pavement, scare the wits out of pedestrians. And one of the things that we've done recently is instituted an operation called Operation Safeway, which is we've had the streets pretty much flooded with cops on street corners, monitoring the behaviour of cyclists.
Let me just ask Londoners, have you noticed the streets, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, have you noticed the streets pretty much, quotes, flooded with cops? Yes? Yeah? No?
Yes.
Mostly no, Mr. Mayor.
No, I think quite a lot of yeses, actually.
Well, let me try again. Have you noticed the streets of London, quotes, most flooded with cops? Mr. Mayor.
Well, I think that you got a good shout there, but I think it was ambiguous. There are loads of what we do with Operation Safeway is put a lot of police officers on the corners at junctions and places where they might do something asinine like jumping on the pavement, and we fine them. And actually, one thing I'm thinking about is whether we could go further, John. Now, here's an idea for you. I don't know whether this will get your juices going. One thing worth thinking about is actually taking their bicycles away. I mean, if you can take somebody's car away,
how are you going to do
well,
that?
I don't know, and I've got to be honest.
You can't keep coming up with these ideas and just say I don't. Your top team are holding their heads in their hands. Isabel, I think, needs a sick bag. The deputy mayor for transport.
I'm not. Look, it goes against my normal instincts. It goes against my normal instincts to distrain an Englishman or an English person of his or her property, and I hear the rights of property being invoked quite properly in the second row.
You're going to confiscate bicycles.
But I think when people jump the lights and they terrify pedestrians and they break the law, I don't see. I have to admit this is a policy that is it's in the early stages of gestation is an exaggeration. As you can see, it's not something that my team has even heard of. But I want to look into it.
Well,
I think it would be a very, very substantial deterrent.
Let's see if your team needs to be driven by the audience. Who likes the idea? Just shout yes if you like the idea of cyclists who jump the lights or ride on the pavement having their bicycles confiscated. Mr. Mayor.
Well, again, I wasn't quite sure what conclusion to draw from that unscientific sample, but square wheels. Look, anyway, so I think perhaps what we're groping to is that society would like stiffer penalties of one kind or another. And
Let's
that's
go back
what
upstairs. Hopefully we've got Ralph on microphone 4. Ralph, so that's right in the middle upstairs. Ralph, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Ralph and I'm 13 years old and I'd like to know what you can do for the future of young people in London.
Well, Ralph, I think
Just wave your hands at the fence. Carry on, Mr. Mayor.
the best thing that...
Just be quiet. Let's listen. Shush, and we'll play. I'd ask you to sit down
yes,
now, sir.
I think I heard the question. The question
Mr.
is,
Mayor.
what are we doing about looked after children?
Mr.
I'll come to you in a second. Would you mind if I just answer the first question, which is, young people growing up in this city have wonderful opportunities. This is the greatest city on earth, and they should be able to get the jobs that this city is churning out and creating in such huge numbers. So employment is the most important thing. But it's no good London creating jobs if kids don't have the ability to read, to write, to do the basic maths, don't have the self-esteem, don't have the confidence to go for those jobs. So you've got to have great education right from the beginning, and we support that through all our educational initiatives, through the Schools Excellence Fund, through all the stuff we're doing to support schools in London, through the Mayor's Fund for London to back literacy and numeracy, particularly, get young Londoners off to the best possible start. Because I think what many people feel strongly is that we've been through a long period in which London has been a kind of Statue of Liberty beacon around the world, saying, bring me your talent, bring me your ideas. And the world has come to London, which is a fantastic thing in many ways. But we want to see young Londoners get those jobs and be in a position to do that work. And people growing up in this city, they need to get a fair suck of the sauce bottle, so to speak. And they need the education, they need the apprenticeships, the ways up.
No, that's enough. That's enough. Can we have this gentleman excluded? I want him taken out now. You're gone. Goodbye. Ralph, I apologise.
That's all right.
Ralph, I apologise. You'll know what it's like to have your first drink in about 3 years' time. We move on. Ignore him, Mr. Mayor. Ignore him. We're moving on. We go to Sue in...
He's asking about children in care. Looked after children, actually, is what the question is about. And Victoria Borwick, I think is Victoria here. We have done a huge amount of work for looked after children. They're a particularly vulnerable
I don't really want you responding to questions asked in that way, if you wouldn't mind.
They will classically be much more vulnerable to get involved in crime.
Okay.
And we do an awful lot to
all right. Let's go to Sue in Leytonstone on microphone 1. Sue, where are you? Sue, can you wave at me? Can microphone 1 wave at me? Right in the corner here, Mr. Mayor. Right far left this way here. Go ahead, Sue.
I know you're a great champion of the London living wage,
yes.
Which I think is now £9.15 an hour. But despite that, there's still a lot of people having to rely on in-work benefits such as tax credits. Now, given that Osborne and Cameron are likely to make some huge cuts to tax credits, would you advocate a huge increase to the London living wage, possibly doubling it? And perhaps you could give a commitment to the audience here and to the listeners that you'd do that.
Well, I think the important thing about the London living wage is it should be set without recourse to political gerrymandering, right? You know, it shouldn't be for politicians simply to announce that they're going to whack it up. It is set by a holy group of GLA economists who work out, you know, what the costs are for families in London and decide what a living wage should be. And I think it'd be wrong for me to impose it just through my own political fiat.
So you're not up for doubling it?
But I do think that London living wage is absolutely vital, and I think it is scandalous that we have in this country, we have gigantic supermarkets that are being subsidised to the tune of hundreds of millions of pounds. I think £500 million in the case of one well-known supermarket brand with in-work benefits. Their labour force is effectively being subsidised by the taxpayer, whilst they have huge dividends and bonuses and private and jets and paying their employees decently. And they can, and they should. And it is quite interesting how this movement is building. I think there are now, when I started as mayor, there were about 23 companies and organisations that pay the living wage. It's now up to about 617. It's massively grown, and it puts tens of millions of pockets into the billions of pounds into the pockets of people who need it. And it is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And so, I think that's, by the way, to get back to your point about the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, I think that is something that they grasp. The Prime Minister made a speech just today, I think, where he said exactly that. He said, you know, we don't want to withdraw benefits. We want to see people paid properly. And at the moment, I think they're not being paid properly. All right. And those companies need to get their act together.
Let's go back upstairs. Noah is from Tower Hamlets. Noah and microphone 5, if you can wave. Here we go. Here comes... So it's up here, Mr Mayor. Front row. Hello, sir. White T-shirt again.
Hi, my borough, Tower Hamlets, and largely because of Canary Wharf, the average wage is £78,000 a year, yet we have the highest amount of people using food banks. And I was just wondering, what has the Mayor done and is doing to spread the wealth and opportunities to local people?
Right. In fact, I mean...
Tremendous question, no?
Tower Hamlets is a classic example of, you know, the old two cities, two worlds, two nations approach. Because you had, in the middle of one of the poorest boroughs in the whole of the UK, you had these great glistening temples of Mammon, and the two sides barely knew each other.
That's what he just said.
But it is changing. And you're now seeing, as I said earlier on, you're now seeing a rise in the incomes of the lowest groups, relatively speaking. And you're actually seeing, as I said, equalisation of those life chances.
Well,
and
not towards 78,000,
the best way to help people in Tower Hamlets is to make sure that they can participate in the economy of this country. And it's an absolute scandal that in Tower Hamlets you've had some families that have gone through several generations without actually being able to speak English. And that is crazy. How on earth are they going to take part in the economy of this country? So you've got to teach them English, you've got to help them, you've got to create the job opportunities and apprenticeships and all the campaigns that we're now engaged in. And actually, you're seeing huge changes in which is the borough of this city where house prices have risen the furthest and fastest, where there's most economic change. Waltham Forest. 20 years ago, Waltham Forest was not going through the kind of boom of energy and dynamism that it is now. And the same thing is happening in Tower Hamlets.
On this theme, London has the 5th largest city economy in the world, as you'll be aware, Mr Mayor, behind Tokyo, New York, Los Angeles, Seoul. It generates around 22% of the nation's GDP. How would that be affected if Britain came out of Europe?
Well, I think that the stakes are much lower, Nick, than they've been for a long time, in the sense that we see this European issue as a kind of existential choice for Britain. It, would it be a total disaster to come out? Is it a disaster to stay in? I think that the question isn't as stark as it was. I think the European economy was about 30% of global GDP about 20 years ago. It's now 19% of global GDP. The big opportunities for our country are around the world in the growth market. So I think withdrawal from the EU would not be the catastrophe that some people paint it as. I think it would be better, because there are advantages. It's good to be able to travel around. It's good to be able to have a say in the decisions taken in Brussels. There are advantages. The best way forward is to get a reformed European Union. And that's what I want to see, and that's what I think David Cameron is going to achieve. I would like to get some serious reform out of the EU on borders, so that people can't come here and immediately claim benefits. I would like to see reform of the whole tendency of the European sausage machine to produce too much legislation. I want to see changes to the common agricultural policy, to the social chapter.
And do you want to see the scrapping of the Human Rights Act?
Well, I think you've got to be. That's not, strictly speaking, related to the EU.
But do you want to see it?
I think the question is.
The question is, do you want to see? It's not hard. The scrapping.
Human Rights Act. Something to incorporate those rights in a British Bill of Rights, and that was actually the intention of the Human Rights Act. And the question I think nobody's quite worked out the answer to is, if you devise a British Bill of Rights, then how is it textually going to deviate from the Human Rights Act, which is itself taken from the Convention on Human Rights, which actually the Brits wrote themselves? Right. And that is I think a knotty problem that nobody has yet, to my mind, satisfactorily answered. If you have a British Bill of Rights, and you get rid of the Human Rights Act, which I'm perfectly prepared to do, what will it say?
Well, that's
and in what way will it offer this audience less protection for their human rights than the current Human Rights Act? That is the question.
All right. Well, let's move on to other questions, and questions from the floor. We're going to find Darius from East Finchley. Darius, where are you? Right. Hello. Right in front of you, Mr. Mayor. Darius, go ahead, sir, in the grey suit.
Good evening, Mr. Johnson. As you said at the start, yourself and City Hall and London and Partners have done a significant amount for London's small business sector and tech sector in the last few years.
Yes, sir.
With that being said, there's a disproportionate amount of funding driving that sector coming from American businesses, albeit in London, but from American firms. So therefore, I just wanted to ask, what do you and your team of policymakers intend to do to ensure that London's small businesses and tech sector continues to receive the support it desperately needs in the next few years to, as you say, remain competitive ahead of major cities in America and the rest of Europe?
Well, it's an absolutely fantastic point, because we have the tragedy is, although we have these amazing startups, we don't produce the same scale and mass as the great American companies, and that is, I think, because we have a different approach to risk. And I think our venture capital industry, our banks, don't have the gung-ho approach of the American. Did you see that film called The Social Network? Was it called The Social Network? Yeah. Where the Zuckerberg character goes in to see the bank. Remember? And he says he wants $500 million, and the bank says, "You bet." And we don't have that kind of level of dynamism in our venture capital operation. We need also, I think, to be more ambitious. I think that the awful thing about
in Britain.
What are you going to do to incentivise that in Britain is what Darius
London,
and in London. Sorry, Darius, in London and Britain.
That we do encourage loans, and we do encourage startups of all kinds.
How much money is in your fund to encourage them?
I can't give you the figure off the top of my head, but I mean, Jerry, how much do we put into startups? We put in. I mean, we'll have put in tens of millions over these.
Tens of millions.
I can't give you the figure, but it's
No,
not. It's not. It's not.
give me a rough ballpark.
It's not the
£1
job.
million.
It's not the job of the state. It's not the job.
Hang on. How much money do you have in this fund, Mr. Mayor?
It's not the job of the taxpayer to
No.
be pouring money
How much
into,
money do you have in the fund?
Well, we had a fund to combat the immediate effects of the crash in 2000 and
how much was in that?
Which was, I think, about £30 million. That's all now been spent.
So how much is there currently?
Look, our job is to provide the platform for these. It's not. I think most commonsensical people here, unlike you, you're meant to be a free market capitalist. It's not my job. It's not my job to go around with taxpayers' money writing checks to start up businesses. What we are doing is building the platform for you to succeed, and that involves.
We must move on, Darius. Do call me. The Mayor is with me in a couple of weeks' time. We may well return to that.
An environment in which they can thrive and prosper, and they are. I mean, it is an astonishing success.
Mr. Mayor, we've only got just a little over 10 minutes, and I
Half
want to pack in a few more questions.
People now employed in that sector.
But
what we also need is the people in that sector themselves to have some of the ambition that you see in America.
Okay.
And I hate to say this, but sometimes in the British psyche, we think, I've made a 10 million, 20 million pound company. That's it. I'm retiring. I'm going to sell the thing and go and buy a house in Gloucestershire. Right? That's what they do. They don't do that in America. In America, they go on till they got, $1 billion.
Okay, we're coming to the last 10 minutes. I think that point is well made.
Vulgar and grasping though it may seem, that's a bit more of the attitude we need.
All right, to be vulgar and grasping. Okay, Nick in Islington is upstairs. Here we go, right up the back. Mr. Mayor, if you follow he's in a check shirt. Hello, Nick, go ahead.
Evening, Mr. Mayor.
Evening, sir.
I'd like to ask you a question about the upcoming mayor elections and GLA elections next year. Steve Hilton, in his book, wrote that British politics are being dominated by a very small elite. 60% of our current cabinet were in Eton or Oxbridge students. Your current candidates lining up to replace you as a Conservative candidate are either billionaires, millionaires, or part of your current establishment in the party. What are you doing to encourage more people from different backgrounds to apply for the GLA and the London candidacy and choose people on policies and not profile?
Well, I think that you're making a brilliant point about social mobility generally. It's not all the candidates, but Ivan Massar, I think, has an amazing backstory. He comes from or I think he was in care himself. He's had an extraordinary history as a self-made millionaire, and he's done unbelievably well. But the general criticism of our society is very well made. We are becoming more rigidly stratified than we should be, and you've got to ask yourself why that is, and why aren't we seeing the same kind of social mobility that we saw in the 1960s and 1950s.
But what Nick actually asked is what you're going to do about it.
Well, one thing I think you should do is look at the quality of education that everybody gets in our city and the ambition and the aspiration they have. This morning, I went to an absolutely incredible school run by Catherine Barbel Singh in North London. Absolutely amazing. Do anybody know who Catherine Barbel Singh? Absolutely incredible school. They were learning stuff off by heart. They were learning the huge screeds of poetry, their times tables. They were learning yards of Shakespeare, goodness knows what, and they loved it. They absolutely loved it. And what she is trying to do in give those kids the kind of disciplined education that they could get in the sorts of schools that you mentioned is being bitterly resisted by the educational establishment. And they hate that kind of stuff. They hate that approach to rote learning and to discipline and memorizing stuff and memorizing. I'm afraid, I think, yes, it is the way forward.
Right.
I think she is completely right.
Okay.
And the kids in her school were from every minority in London. They were from every socio-economic group. There were kids from the poorest backgrounds that you could imagine, and they were absolutely glowing with optimism about what they could achieve in that school.
Okay.
And I think that is what we need. That is what we need in London. And actually, London schools are getting better. But we need to fight the sort of complacency of the educational establishment who think that, you know, you've got to let kids find the answers within themselves.
That's how you were taught, clearly, Mr. Mayor, and we know that you're very... Yeah. So you'll have no problem in telling me immediately 7/8.
56.
Oh, that's pretty impressive. 9 9s? 9 9s?
81. What's 12 12s?
144. I think we better move on. Just for our enjoyment. Where's James in Hillingdon, please? James in Hillingdon, over there, sir, to your right, Mr. Mayor, extreme right there. Go ahead, James.
Hi, Boris. I'd like to talk to you about housing. Year on year, I've seen this city miss its housing targets. And I've seen you bluster, I've seen you deflect, I've seen you use whip, throw in a weird historical reference, and then when that's failed, you've moved the targets themselves. Nothing you or the wider government's done has worked. Help to Buy has caused a housing bubble. Shared ownership has got a lot of problems of its own, because once you've bought one, there's not really a secondary sale market. And you've prattled on for years about brownfield housing sites. You're boasting building 10,000 homes here, 10,000 homes there, when this city has increased in population by 500,000 since 2011. Now, will you, as a free market conservative, stand up against your colleagues, the NIMBYs, many of who, by the way, do very well in the buy-to-let market, and try and expand this city into the green belt so people can buy affordable homes in the free market?
Right. Well, James, I mean, I thought for a minute you were approaching this from a left-wing point of view, but you then in the final phrase of your saying, you veered off into this dramatic free market approach, and obviously I have a lot of sympathy with that general objective. The difficulty, and if you look at the really huge years for housing construction, they were in the 1930s, when there was no concept of the green belt. Planning, there was very little planning restrictions, and they built far more homes than I think 56,000 homes in 1 year from memory. 80,000 homes, says Sir Edward Lister. 80,000 homes in 1 year, and that was when you had all that ribbon development going on in Metroland, made possible by the tube and all those fantastic changes to London. It, of course, engulfed huge tracts of green, beautiful countryside, and it certainly couldn't happen today. And James, the reason I oppose what you're saying, and I think you're wrong, is because if we were to do that, if we were to take in your bulldozers there and carve up that territory, they would immediately relax on everything they're doing to decontaminate, to remediate the brownfield sites, and to get them. And so all those wonderful things that are now going on in Greenwich, in Old Oak Common, around London, the Olympic Park, dead as a doornail. You would never get the brownfield regeneration. You'd never get us building where we should be building first if you did what you're saying. So I think it's economically the wrong prescription. We can build 400,000 homes on brownfield sites, and that's where we need to start.
James,
that is where we need to start.
And
yes, James, we are going as a country, we are going to need to build hundreds of thousands more homes outside London. Yes, of course we are. But as I've said earlier on, if you wanted that, the obvious place is the Thames Gateway. That is where the areas of post-industrial decline, and that would be galvanised, of course, if you had a new airport in that area and a new transport hub. And that is what we should be doing. But your point about the need for hundreds of thousands more homes is completely right.
All right, let's come to a couple of Twitter questions. Can Boris define a shy Tory?
Can I what?
Define a shy Tory.
Look, I think what is it? A shy Tory is presumably somebody who
apparently they won the election.
Who voted
well, clearly
Tory,
you can't, can you?
And hang on, voted Tory, but is a bit bashful about it.
Why might that be?
And I think it might be. Are you a shy Tory?
No, I'm not shy. I'm not going to tell you which way I vote.
All right. But I think you're being bad. Then you're a shy Tory.
What is there to be?
There he is. We've got one.
I didn't hear that. Sorry, I genuinely didn't hear
you are. You're so shy. You're cloaking your entire voting intention in discretion.
Why would Tory?
There you are. That's
why would a
example.
Tory be shy?
I can define
Mr.
a shy.
Mayor?
I define a shy Tory. It is Mr. Nick Ferrari, a blushing varlet if ever I saw one.
Should George Osborne even cut working tax credits in his emergency budget?
Look, I've said what I've said about. I think you should certainly be cutting welfare, and there's no question that there is scope to do that. You've got a £220 billion budget, and there is lots of people on low incomes are still seeing people get more in welfare than they are earning through the sweat of their brow, and that cannot be right. That cannot be right. So there are things you can do, but what I want to get back before you start hacking back at people's in-work benefits, you've got to look at the low pay that they are getting from the corporations that could be coughing up much, much more to help them.
And one last tweet before we go to Edward for your question. Edward, one last tweet here. When Sol Campbell said on LBC this afternoon the solution to the tube crisis was to make the platforms longer, was he right?
Look, I think there may be cases. I'm just trying to think where we could lengthen the tube, the platforms. What you can, the solution to the, let me put it this way, the solution to the tube demand. I mean, we're now running more people on the tube than ever before.
Do we extend the platform?
You extend the tube. You don't extend necessarily. I think it's difficult to extend the platforms without massive expense in some of these Victorian tunnels, but where you can do it, you should extend the tube. And where I'm proud to say that under this mayoralty, for the first time in 15 years, we're extending the tube we're extending the Northern Line. That will happen in just a few months. We'll break ground on the extension of the Northern Line, and as people in this audience know, we want to extend the tube to South East London as well, and extend the Bakerloo line, which will be a blessing. But there's an even greater prize if we integrate that with South Eastern Rail.
All right, and just before the final question, one from me. How sorry did you feel for my former broadcasting chum Nick Clegg on election night?
I think Nick Clegg, as I've told you many times before, Nick Clegg did a very sensible, grown-up and responsible thing. And he took his party into government when there were people who said, don't do it, don't contaminate yourself by association with evil Tories, don't do it. And he did it, and he governed, I think, very sensibly and very responsibly, helped to reduce the deficit, and yes, he managed in the same process to extinguish his political party. But it was the right thing to do. He laid down his party for his country, and it was actually. Right. And I think history will judge Nick Clegg very favourably indeed.
Final question, and there's some applause for that. Final question, Edward in Bermondsey. Edward.
Hello, Boris.
Sir.
I'm praying that by God's grace you resign today as Mayor of London.
Well, no. He's still
The
with
reason
us.
why is because you allowed the naked bike ride in London.
Right.
Yeah, where over 1,000 men, women, were naked in front of families, men and women, and their children, obviously had their minds poisoned. Yeah, by all these naked bodies. Yeah, riding past Whitehall. Yeah. So, were you wrong, Boris Johnson, for allowing this? And if you do admit you're wrong, would you resign?
First of all, I'm going to disappoint you because I don't consider that to be a resigning matter, and I think that I happen to think one of the glories and one of the reasons London is riding so high at the moment, one of the reasons the world loves London is because we do have a spirit of generosity and tolerance and celebration of the human being in all our amazing diversity.
What, naked on a bicycle?
Including and perhaps even particularly. And by the way, let me tell you what we did. If there are parks in Germany where they're starkers the whole time, which I discovered
how do you know?
Quite by accident. And let me tell, and I understand your strong views on public nudity, but all I can urge you to do, sir, is go into the National Gallery And there you will see disrobed, naked as the day they were born, the Rokeby Venus.
On a bicycle.
Titian's Danae, whoever it happens to be, absolutely starkers and probably enjoying
All right,
it
if
too.
I ask you one final
you know,
question, do you promise to answer it in a sentence?
Yes.
When you leave City Hall for the last time, will you have a tear in your eye?
Well, probably through sheer exertion of hauling out the many books that I've accumulated over the years. No, I will. Listen, seriously, it has been. I don't need to start blubbing now, by the way. It has been a fantastically productive period of my life, and yes, I will be very sad. And the only thing but if I regret one thing, I suppose I will regret many things. Is why on earth, Nick, we could not persuade you.
Oh, never mind me.
To submit your own. Do you not think, ladies and gentlemen, this is our last chance?
Yeah.
Who thinks Mr. Nick Ferrari should offer himself up to the voters of London?
Overwhelmed.
Yes?
Overwhelmed by lethargy. Ladies and gentlemen, keep the applause going.
Who thinks he shouldn't?
This has been the final week. The conversation continues on LBC, where
that,
Clive
Nick.
Bull
You've got
is
support.
waiting for your calls. You can carry on tweeting to #AskBoris. It's the last time I will say it, for now anyway, as London Mayor. Your appreciation, please. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for making a great evening.
Thank you.
Boris Johnson, Mr. Thank you. Clive Bull, over to you. It's LBC.